Hey, you're back with me, Ed Stott, on That's Helpful. Tell me this, do you like the water? We've done a few episodes on Blue Mind and that kind of thing, which are great. I'll link to them in the show notes, which you'll absolutely love. And I guess from your response to those, you absolutely love it. I love it, but generally when it's warm and the ocean is over 20 degrees, we know how fabulous getting out in the water can be for our mental health and overall well-being. There's a growing body of research showing that cold water can be absolutely transformative. So what is it actually doing to our bodies, and how can we start to reap the benefits in our own lives? Dr. Mark Harper is a consultant anaesthetist at Sussex University hospitals in the UK and a leading expert in the prevention of hypothermia in surgical patients and in the therapeutic uses of cold water adaptation and cold water swimming. Mark, I want to find out how you got onto this in a second, but even in your title, there's a contradiction there, right? In that your job is stopping people from getting too cold when they've had surgery, but then you're really interested in helping people get really cold when they're swimming. Why? What's the difference between the two, and what does it tell us about the way in which cold water swimming or cold water exposure works within our body to give us some of these benefits?
Yeah, so it might seem outwardly, you're quite right, that there's a contradiction there.
Yeah.
The thing is that it depends how you look at it, but the thing is, hypothermia is always bad for you. So actually getting your core of your temperature cold, that is bad for you. And that's true if you go in the water when you're just swimming, or it's true when you're having an operation. You have more complications if you get cold during surgery. However, exposing yourself to cold, that really toughens the body up in very simple terms, and so it might even be beneficial before you go into surgery, as long as you don't overdo it and you don't become cold in the process, whereas you kind of lose those benefits.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting because I think that's where so many people like me get put off, because I feel like the people who often espouse the benefits of cold water therapy are pretty intense with it. They've got tubs full of ice in their backyard, or, they've emptied out an old fridge freezer and then filled that up with cold water. They get really intense about it. Whereas what I like about your research is it doesn't have to be that scary. I'm excited to talk to you about how we can introduce it in our own lives. So tell me, how did you get into this? It was when you're on a 6-month sabbatical, right?
That goes all the way back there, but that's not quite. I mean, basically what happened, I took 6 months out of my medical training, or my postgraduate medical training, to go and work in a ski resort. Nothing medical, just as a ski guide. But that ended up generating a conference, of which we've just run the 25th, I think.
Wow.
And that first conference, I gave a talk about hypothermia and altitude. And that started off my career in researching perioperative hypothermia, stopping people getting cold during surgery. But it was that sort of started things off, and I was sort of reading about things cold. And when I came back to Brighton, I'd done all my training pretty much in London. I came back to Brighton as a consultant. I started swimming in the sea all year round, and this was because the pool was shut. I was very much a pool swimmer. But anyway, I was as shocked as anyone else when I heard that there was a sea swimming section of the swimming club, and that they swam all year round. But anyway, I started swimming in the sea, and I still remember that first time getting in and just, feeling the cold. But as I got out, I just felt so good, and I really wasn't expecting that. And then with my increasing knowledge about cold and the effects and adaptation to cold, I saw, well, maybe there's some potential for this as research in the first instance, I thought, for my surgical patients. So as I said, exposing yourself to cold toughens you up. It's like going to the gym. You go to the gym, you work out, it's those micro tears in the muscle that cause it to build back stronger. If you injure yourself, that's hypothermia, so we want to avoid that. So you build up this resilience to stress by swimming in the sea, and then you could possibly, and it still remains hypothetical, reduce your complications to surgery.
Wow, really interesting. And so with your research, it's not really been researched very much before now in terms of the impact of cold water therapy on us. Why is it taking so long for us to start to realize that cold water exposure does have these benefits?
There's you can go back a long way for this to see why aren't we looking at it, and in broad terms that's because of the last 70, 80 years particularly. It's been very much the pharmaceutical era. We started to get really effective medicine. I mean, I couldn't do my daily job without medicines, don't get me wrong, I'm not against them, but it skewed our perspectives. And of course there's a lot of medicine, a lot of money to be made in this kind of thing. There's a lot of finance behind it. I mean, these days, to do a really big clinical trial, you really need to be a multinational company to have the funds to do it. So I think that's partly it. And then the second phase is how long has it taken me to get to the stage where I can actually produce these clinical studies. It's because it needs a bit of momentum. It just takes so long to put trials together and work from basic principles, and kind of just bring it all into one place and find other people. I mean, you can't do this thing on your own. It's got a fantastic team of both qualitative and quantitative researchers out there who are helping drive these projects forward. And now only it's becoming more accepted socially, I guess, or more popular socially. I think that's really helped. And so there are many aspects just coming together now, but it's taken a long time to get here.
Yeah, super interesting. And so what are some of the benefits that you found in your research and that's been researched across the board in terms of what we can actually gain from exposing ourselves to cold water?
I think the headline thing that we got to take away, and the one that we're actually really beginning to get some decent evidence for, is the effect on mental health. And it goes back to that time when the first time I got out of the water, thinking, "Oh wow, I feel good. I wasn't expecting that," and that's why I keep going. That's why I was there this morning. Over
Yep.
20 years later. So that's part of it. And then also a few years later, I read an article in the Guardian newspaper which said, well, inflammation is related to a lot of cases of depression. It's probably about 60%. And
Wow.
so if you can treat inflammation, you can treat some forms of depression. I thought, I knew by this stage from my reading that you could reduce inflammation with cold water swimming. So I thought, hey, look, I feel good and I'm not even depressed. And it might treat inflammation. Maybe we could use cold water swimming as a clinical intervention. And so that's kind of where that started, and that's progressed over the years to now where we're at the point of starting a full-scale randomized controlled trial of cold water swimming against standard treatment for the treatment of depression. So I think that's
Wow.
where we've got a lot. And we have done, we've obviously done some preliminary studies which have had really positive outcomes. With everything else, we're at a much more basic stage. What we did a few years ago was we're thinking that, well, we know there are people out there who are basically using cold water swimming to self-medicate, but no, we can't look at everyone. We thought, well, let's send a survey out and see what's happening. And our theory was it would be inflammatory related conditions. I think this is the major way in which cold water swimming has its effect. And it's not by abolishing the inflammatory response, which we need, but it's about attenuating it, bringing it to good levels, good physiological levels, rather than being in bad pathological levels. So we sent this out. We expected like 30 or 40 answers. We ended up with over 700. And the
Wow.
majority were using it for mental health, but there was maybe a quarter of people who were using it for other conditions, and they were, as we thought, inflammatory related conditions such as fibromyalgia or arthritis or inflammatory bowel disease or something like this. And even better, the vast majority of these were finding some benefit from it.
It's amazing. It's absolutely incredible. So cool. And so when we expose ourselves to cold in this way, what's physically happening in our body that's kind of speaking to our brain and maybe making a difference to our mental health?
I think in the first instance, the immediate effect is to have this massive outpouring of the sympathetic nervous system, so the fight flight response. But fight flight, of course, is also excitement. It's context, it's how we think about it that determines how we react to it or how we remember it. So you're getting huge, big secretions of noradrenaline and adrenaline, these really buzzy drugs, or drugs that, hormones that go around the body, making us feel excited. And I think that has, that's the big take-home effect for when you get in, and this persists afterwards. I think it also takes us out of our body. It breaks those loops that are going on in our mind. You sort of, I know for myself, I go in, there's all kinds of rubbish. Nothing particularly stressful or bad necessarily, but, I know there's just chatter going on in the brain. And when I come out totally clear, it's like, oh, isn't this nice? I feel good. And, I think, and we get this a lot in the feedback from the courses we run, is it just takes people out of their minds and into their bodies and into the world.
Yeah, I started surfing here in Australia maybe a year ago now. And I think one of the things that I love about surfing is, of course, it has like the exercise element and you're out in the ocean. So you're getting that blue mind. But the other thing is that you can't think about anything else when you're doing it. And I wonder if cold water swimming also offers that release and that escape, because you're so focused on how bloody cold it is and the sensations within your body that it forces you to be quite mindful of your body and your mental health and what's going on right then in the moment. I think that's a really powerful thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. You can't think of anything else. And even, all the focus goes onto your body and onto the sensations. And even though you might not consciously shift that focus, it just goes because the physical sensation is so strong. And certainly, depending on where you do it, certainly here, and I'm sure on the coast of Australia, you've got the wave. So you have to think about getting into the water as well. And I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I like a swim in the lake, and I think you probably get just as much benefit really from swimming in a lake or even a cold swimming pool. But there is something else to sort of looking at the waves, working out where you get in and if it's safe and things like this.
That connection to nature. I absolutely love it. And so we talked there about, the cold water swimming and the benefits, like the added benefits of that cold water exposure that brings. Do we have to be swimming or, near me, the lots of fancy gyms have opened up that have like wellness centers with cold plunges. Are we going to reap some of the benefits if we just do a cold plunge and that kind of thing?
I think you're going to reap a good proportion of the benefits if you just do a cold plunge. The thing is, it doesn't actually have to be that cold. And a lot of the gym ones, they're maybe 4 degrees, so they're pretty cold and they're pretty unpleasant. You're not going to stay in there very long. You don't have to stay in very long, but just maybe 2-3 minutes, something like that. And, I find a big difference. At the moment here, it's about maybe 8 degrees, and that's all right. But when it's down below 5 or 6 degrees, it gets pretty unpleasant. It's still worth it. You come out and you feel so good. But so, you are going to get most of them. I think one of the other key points, though, is that going to a gym, getting in a cold thing, where's the fun in that, really? The fun is going out, being outside, doing it with mates. So you will physiologically get the benefits, but I think one of the key things is that's what keeps you coming back. It's my mates will be there. I want to go and join them. We're going to have a laugh, and so that's a really important. It's like the diet that works is the one you can stick to even when you've lost the weight. It's something that people stick to because they have so much fun doing it. Whereas a cold plunge, you probably get the physiological benefits, but it's much harder just to keep doing.
Yeah, absolutely. We spoke to a brain scientist on the show who's an expert in memory. And she said to us the best thing that you can do for your brain, it's like she calls it a triple treat for your brain. So it's got to have exercise, community, and you're learning something new. And it strikes me that cold water swimming is pretty much the perfect example of that. So probably that's why we're also reaping these benefits. So you said there 3 minutes is kind of perfect. Why 3 minutes if we're doing that cold water plunge? I guess if we're swimming and it's a little bit warmer, we can stand a bit long and it's going to be way more fun if our mates are there with us. But if we're doing 3 minutes of cold water exposure, why 3 minutes?
Well, 3 minutes is a rough thing. Yeah, everyone's different every day, and you might not have slept as well. You might have had something to drink the night before, or just be a bit unwell. So it's really getting to know how you feel and know your body, and that's how long it should be. When you're down at those kind of temperatures, of the 4 degrees or whatever your cold plunge bucket is, or whatever, then you get cold quite quickly, and it's quite easy to tip over into hypothermia where you're shivering afterwards. And it's 3 degrees. I think it's better to look at it as how you react to the water. So even now, I've been doing this 20 years. Even though I go in and straight away I'm feeling quite tense, and your body tenses up. You get that initial hit, you get that initial shock, and then after a minute, 2 minutes, I never time it. That's why I couldn't tell you. But that goes, that goes, and I know, okay, I'm over the worst of it, and then I can look around, I can take in the scenery, and at that point, basically, you've been in the water long enough. And 2-3 minutes is probably a minimum, which-ish, but you're better off looking at your breathing, waiting to get over to that shock. And when you've done that, you've done your bit. You've got 80% of the benefit, say. The other thing, though, is worth pointing out is that so you get adaptation to the cold, which is by repeatedly going into the water. So what this does is it has a long-term effect on your stress levels. So your stress levels go down, your baseline adrenaline, noradrenaline levels go down, your baseline blood pressure goes down, and your peaks go down as well. So again, you're more in that good physiological zone. However, you can have an effect every time, or a stronger effect every time, by putting your face in the water, because this has a parasympathetic effect, which is the rest digest thing. So what we can do to reduce stress is either reduce our sympathetic fight-flight response or increase our parasympathetic response. And you do that by putting your face in the water. So every time you go in the water, that does it. It goes via the vagus nerve, has a direct anti-inflammatory effect on the body. So you can boost it every time. The key thing is to get in and get past that cold shock, at least until you're very used to it. Get past that cold shock before you put your face in the water, because otherwise it can confuse the body with this massive sympathetic response and this massive parasympathetic response at the same time. But again, it takes 2 or 3 minutes. Once you're over that shock, your breathing's back under control. You put your face in maybe 3 times, and again, you don't want to just take it straight out. You put your face in and it's ow, or words to that effect. But then after a few seconds, it gets better, it calms down, and then that's it. So that's a few seconds rather than a few minutes at that point. And then, of course, if you're when the weather's better, swim, exercise, add that in, because it's good for us. We know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it strikes me that what we're doing is kind of exposing ourselves to discomfort. And when we're riding out, that 2 minutes, and then we go like, okay, I've got this now. You calm yourself down, your breathing's returning to normal, you're actually observing your surroundings. Do you think part of this is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and knowing that we will be okay?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, a lot of the feedback, again, that's another thing that people say to us after they've done the courses is, when I've done that, I know that I can face anything during the day. And it really helps people deal with stresses in other parts of their lives.
Absolutely. And so if we don't have access to those horrible cold plunges in a fancy gym or the ocean, what about cold showers? Is that going to give us some of these benefits?
It's going to give you some of these benefits. So the thing is, the effect of the cold is mediated by two things. One is the actual temperature, and the other is how quick you cool down. In a shower, not usually as cold as a cold plunge, but cold enough because, again, this is the other thing. You don't need super cold. Anything under 20 degrees, water under 20 degrees produces a really strong physiological effect. You're probably not getting you're definitely not getting any increased effect below 10 degrees, and
Yeah,
you're probably
right.
not getting increased effect below 15 degrees in terms of
Wow.
how your body adapts. So you are getting some effect. It's probably below 20 degrees, but it's probably around 20 degrees in the shower. So that's not as cold as the water most of the time. I mean, that's the maximum temperature in the UK during the summer. And also how quickly you cool. If you've just got a shower going over, you don't cool as quickly as you do when you put your whole body at once in the water. So a cold bath, just a bath with cold, you don't have to put any ice cubes in it or anything like that. But that would probably have more of an effect. But we know it does have an effect. There's a lovely study where they took an office, half the workers had cold showers every day, and half didn't. And those who had the cold showers had less sick days. So it has an effect. It has a measurable effect, but it won't be as much as getting in immersing yourself in cold water. And for my part, I hate cold showers. I still hate them. Don't mind getting into ice cold water, but cold showers, hate them.
Yeah, it just doesn't hit the same, does it? It's just not the same. And so, are there any absolute no-nos? If we want to start doing this, whether that's in the shower or the cold plunge at your gym or getting out in the ocean, are there any absolute no-nos when it comes to exposing yourself to cold water?
I think the best thing is to start with it relatively warm, over 10 degrees. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that is, and then you work your way down. I start by chance in the middle of summer and work my way down. I think that's the best way of doing it. I think really important is going in, put your body in first and not your face. After a while, it's fine. But probably need 6 exposures and then you're sort of quite well adapted, and then you're probably safe. But I mean, you're probably safe anyway. It's not that dangerous. But there's no point exposing yourself to unnecessary risk. So that's one thing. Get your body in first before you put your face in. And I mean, my other strongest rule, in a way, is it kind of derives from something called Agnes Allen's rule, which is almost anything in life is easier to get into than out of. I mean, it's so true for anything, and it's true for the water as well. Before you go in, make sure you know how you can get out. I mean, you can always get into the water, you can't always get out. So I think if you do that, you're onto a winner. In terms of health, it's actually fairly safe. If you're fit enough to do exercise, if you're fit enough to park the car, walk down the beach, get in the water, get out of the water, walk back up the beach, you're probably healthy enough to do it. And of course, there can be some people who are told by a doctor not to do intense exercise. If that's the case, you shouldn't do it. So essentially, it's this big sympathetic fight-flight hit. So if you can cope with that in daily exercise or something like that, you can cope with that in the water. I mean, there's some rare things like something called cold urticaria and things like this, but on the whole, it's pretty safe if you're very sensible about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the benefit, isn't it? Because they really, with a lot of when we're talking about mental health or depression specifically, obviously there are side effects to medication. There's no such thing as a free lunch, but there aren't any side effects or downsides to cold water exposure, right?
Well, the side effects are a bit of exercise. The side effects are actually good. You expose yourself to
Yeah.
cold, and then you might swim around a bit, and you might be out in nature a little bit. I look at it as the side effects being good effects with cold water. So and apart from the odd condition where your body can't cope with it, I think it is really pretty good in that respect.
Yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
I often think of it as part of the thing is what you're doing is, so you're putting this, you're giving yourself adrenaline, noradrenaline, that's kind of dopamine, whatever. And that's what you get from taking cocaine. However, what you're doing when you're taking cocaine is you're putting something external into your body, and your body doesn't really know how to cope with it. It's too much for it. Whereas here, you're getting all that effect, but the body's generating it, the body's controlling it. It's got these amazing control mechanisms. Every sort of upper has a downer, and so it's this constant tension between the two, which is finely balanced. And what you're doing here is you're just involving that fine balance within your body, and that's why it's so good for you. And they're not the side effects you get from sticking something external into the body.
Yeah, absolutely. I would always go for cold water therapy over cocaine. But that's very reassuring. And so some people do like to do like a sauna and get super warm and then go and expose themselves to cold water. Is that a good idea? Are we going to get more benefits from that? Or is that just these, extreme gym bros?
I don't think you're really going to get any significant benefits. You might do. The thing about warmth, so warm stress, heat stress, that has similar effects to cold stress. It's just a bit more difficult to generate. Getting into cold water is actually quite an easy, straightforward thing to do. Having a sauna and these things. I mean, they have to get their core temperatures up to sort of quite significant levels. So it's just not as convenient, I think, is the way. But you can get the effects from heat stress. Then the other thing is getting warm. One of the other top tips is make sure you're warm before you get into the water. Essentially, the more warmth your body's storing, then the more heat you've got you can give up to your environment before your core gets cold. Because this is what we're always trying to avoid, is getting our core hypothermic. So if you're heated through from a sauna, your body is at its maximum heat storage capacity. So that's a good thing. So the problem comes when you're sort of only half warm from the outside. If you do that, if you sort of warm up externally, but you're not warm all the way through like you are from the sauna, you actually cool quicker in the water than you heat up. If you warm up from the inside out, so if you're doing exercise or something like that, it's the opposite effect. You cool slower.
Interesting, right? So maybe after a gym session or after a run or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, this was really brought home to me a few years ago. I was ski touring in the Arctic, and we'd be climbing on skis, 1,000 meters vertical every day, skiing down, and then we used to catch a boat out every day. So I used to get on the beach, get back down to the beach at the end of my ski, take the kit off, swim out to the boat, and then get the boat home. And it was 2 degrees, I think, and it didn't feel as cold as it did back in Brighton, which was 8 degrees, because I was so warm from all that exercise. So it was much better for me doing it that way.
Yeah, super interesting. So if we only take away, one thing from the conversation about cold swimming and cold water exposure, what's the main thing you want people to take away?
My summary is not that long. So, just a few minutes depending on the temperature, but maybe just 2 or 3 minutes. Not that cold, anything under 20 degrees, and not that often. Just once a week is enough to have measurable benefits, because that's what we've done for the trials that we've been running, which is for depression and or anxiety. What we've been doing is running courses in the outdoor bodies of water. We've done lakes, we've done the sea, we've done outdoor swimming pools, unheated outdoor swimming pools around the country, and they've got people going in once a week for 8 weeks, and we're seeing measurable clinical effects from this.
Wow, it's absolutely incredible. So cool. I love it. And even, it's not, anxiety and depression is your main focus, but even people with issues like migraines and and fibromyalgia that you mentioned, IBD, a whole host of diseases and, physical problems. People are gaining benefits from all of those things, right?
Yeah, and interestingly, a lot of people have come on our courses, or I know a lot of people who've come to cold water swimming for other reasons. You mentioned migraines. So there's a woman, Beth, who had dreadful migraines. She couldn't complete her PhD. She's getting 28 migraine days a month. I mean, yes, pretty much every day. And the WHO says that a migraine is as bad as being tetraplegic. Yeah, when you've got a proper migraine, it really is that bad. And she did this amazing film, and what she did was that she said, I've got to do something. I'll get out of bed. I live by the sea in Wales. I'm going to go and just swim in the sea every day. And my boyfriend, is now a husband, is going to do a film of it. We're just going to call it 100 Days of Vitamin C. And so she did that for something quite separate, but then she noticed her migraines getting better. And she was able to go back and complete her PhD and things like this. So it did. So although she still got the migraines, what it did, and this is often what we find with cold water swimming, is that it doesn't cure you, but it gets you from a non-functional to a functional level. And you see some of the things. There's some days she was so bad she couldn't get out and couldn't get to the water. And there's a bit of film of her getting into a really cold bath. And the relief of it is just amazing. I really recommend watching it. Yeah, it's freely available on Vimeo or YouTube or something like that. And you really see the effect of the cold. But this is, she's not alone. There's a lot of people who came to the courses because they were depressed or anxious, and they might have fibromyalgia, chronic pain, and another friend who has inflammatory bowel disease, who basically, he's on industrial doses of steroids. And not the good ones that build you up, he hasn't taken tablets for years now. So, but all these people came to it not for their conditions; they came to it for another reason and found that their condition was improving.
Yeah, amazing. And so how long do you think we need to, if we're thinking, actually, you know what, I'm going to try this. How long do we need to stick with it for before we're going to see some benefits?
I think, well, one thing to note is that the second time is always the worst, because the first time you're all psyched up for it, and you just go in and you get out and say, yes, I've done it. The second time you're not psyched up. Yeah, I did it. It was okay last time, and you're not adapted in any way really by the second time, and so it's just hideous. By the third time, you start noticing it getting better. And what the cold adaptation studies, these aren't for clinical reasons, but when looking at the physiology behind it, which is where all this started, they use 6 dips. So you can actually do that over a day, as long as you warm up in between. But 6 immersions in cold water is usually enough to get that adaptation. And so I say, definitely go past the bad second time. But if you manage 6 goes, you're fine. You can do it over 6 weeks. That's absolutely fine. That will still produce that effect. You can do it over a shorter period of time. It doesn't really matter. And again, the studies tend to have used somewhere between 10 and 15 degrees. 15 seems like a happy middle ground of a slightly stronger effect than 20. But 20 is fine as well.
Yeah, brilliant. And so if we don't perhaps have a condition that we're looking to treat, but maybe if we know we're going in for surgery, or like for me, I'm 29 weeks pregnant, so I know my body's going to have some trauma coming to it in the next few weeks. If we know that we're going to have one of these big impacts on our body, if we start with this cold water therapy, are we going to see those benefits when we come to that?
I think so. I mean, it's very difficult to measure, and we haven't looked at this, but the theory behind it, I think, is very strong. I mean, I broke my leg a couple of years ago, and I just didn't have that much pain. It was quite a bad break, and I'm not a particularly brave person. I'm not a real wimp either, but I've got an average pain threshold, say, and I was really surprised. And recovery was good, and it felt so good. I think it was about 6 weeks before I could go back in the water again, and oh my God, the effect was just remarkable. So I think there's a lot to be said for that, and a lot of women, pregnant women, love it. We've just written the paper; it's not published yet. Where we took the responses from women who have been pregnant, and the effects really have been only positive. That they
Wow.
describe themselves. So we haven't sort of taken them out. I mean, you just can't do that. You take them out and
No.
put them in the water. But although there are many questions still to be answered, the overall impression, in fact, the complete impression was that it was a really good thing, and that how people felt, how women felt while they were pregnant. Especially the weight and the heat and whatever. It's just the relief of getting in the cold water, and there are no downsides that we can see. I mean, babies are very well protected in the uterus. You have to do quite a lot to affect them more than the mother.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great. I'm going to get out in it, because I haven't been in the water as much because I had to stop surfing when I was at 5 months. I think the bump just got too big and I felt a bit cruel rocking about on the baby on the surfboard. But you've encouraged me. We've got a pool here that's not heated, so I'm going to go out and get into that and see what I can do. I'm at that point where I'm trying to take anything I can get, to be honest, Mark. So this sounds like a good option. I love it.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate you sparing the time to chat. It's been fascinating.
That's been a really enjoyable conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Brilliant. Dr. Mark Harper is a consultant anaesthetist at Sussex University Hospitals in the UK, and his book is called Chill, the Cold Water Swim Cure. I'm going to put the link to that in the show notes so you can check that out, because there's so much more science to this, and so many more examples of things that cold water exposure can help with, like chronic pain, arthritis, PTSD. That's more in the book that you're going to really find very helpful. So if you're interested in this, definitely check that out. And I'll link to the couple of things that we mentioned as well, like Beth's story, and I'll try and find her video for you so I can link to that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. I hope you are enjoying the show so far. Just a note to let you know, the video podcasts are now on Spotify, which is very exciting. I've had to learn to edit video over the last few weeks, which has been a challenge, but I think I've got there for you guys. And also you can find us on YouTube. I'll also link to that in the show notes. I am so grateful to you for joining me. If you're enjoying the series so far, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. And please leave me a review wherever you're listening. I really appreciate it, and it genuinely helps get the word out about the show. I'm Ed Stott, and I sincerely hope that's helpful.